The race for the 10th Senate has been focal as the countdown to the handover to a new government approaches. As calls for the Southeast or South-South to get the top leadership position intensifies, some northern aspirants are opposed to the zoning of the leadership position. Senators from various geopolitical zones have thrown their hats in the ring to emerge as the number 3 citizen of the country. Though the All Progressives Congress APC is yet to zone the office, both old and new lawmakers are already jostling for the position. While some are of the view that the party leadership must avoid another Muslim leader for the top job in the Senate, others posit that competence and experience should form the basis for the plum job. Joining us on this show this morning as the conversation around the 10th Senate gathers momentum is Senator Agom-Jarigbe, Senator representing Cross River North for the People's Democratic Party, PDP. Welcome to the morning show, Senator Jarigbe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'm sure you've been following the jostling for the leadership of the Senate, the 10th Assembly, the Senate in this case, with whether the position should be zoned to the Southeast or the South-South, or it should be left open, and whether or not religion should be a major factor. Some people are saying a Muslim ticket, a Muslim proposal will not work. Some are saying it doesn't matter because religion should not be an issue. It should be about competence, and that even geography should not be an issue. Well, what do you think? You know the politics of the Senate. What is your position?
Thank you very much. I want to start by saying that the Senate has its standing rules on the issue of picking presiding officers or training up presiding officers. And it states clearly that the position is, or the positions of presiding officers, that's for the Senate President and the Deputy Senate President, the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, should be reserved for returning legislators. Returning legislators. And I think that's a fundamental point to me. The issue of zoning or no zoning doesn't come up as it concerns our standing rules. The issue of religion, yes. Some people want to pick and choose when to talk about religion and when to talk about federal character. But for me, I think that we should choose the best out of the many that will come out, looking at our standing rules, because we cannot go outside of our standing rules. And I think that as senators, we should be allowed to choose who will be the Senate President. That's my position on that.
All right.
I'm from the South-South. And we have the interest of our region to protect as a people. And we are going to start meeting very soon to take a decision on which of the candidates we are going to support as a people. When we meet, we will speak on our personal convictions and agree on the preponderance of opinion amongst us.
All right, Senator Jarigbe, I hear you, and it's quite a deviation from what our previous guests have said. So Senator Agom-Jarigbe and also Mr. Obon, Honorable Obon yesterday, when he spoke about the zoning of the leadership of the National Assembly, in their view, they opine that if we have a Muslim ticket in terms of president and vice president, it's only fair and in the interest of justice and equity to zone the leadership position. So I want to understand your point. You're going for competence. In terms of competence, we have a number of senators who have indicated interest, some of whom are also from the northern geopolitical zones, some of whom religions are Muslim. In the interest of competence, if a northern Muslim candidate emerges winner, would you regard that as being fair?
Well, the truth about it is the people you've mentioned, they are talking from the perspective of their party and their zoning. I'm speaking as a Nigerian, a member of the PDP, and from the South-South. And I cannot, on my own, take a unilateral decision on this issue. I might have my own perspective, but I will subsume that for the larger interest. And I've said it categorically, that in the South-South, as senators from the South-South, we are going to meet. We have a South-South caucus. And one of us, ranking senators from the South-South, will chair that caucus. And we will speak as a region. So when they speak from the perspective of their own party, the APC, and the Muslim ticket, and the zoning and all of that, it's not a sweeping universal.
Well, I get your point that, lawmakers are to choose their own leaders from among their own ranks. But how strong is the role of the party in this regard? Because the National Executive Committee of the APC, for example, having the majority, may well just decide and not necessarily, what will determine will be negotiations across all the parties. I think about 8 parties are now represented, and the PDP is not necessarily having enough numbers or anybody or any of the other parties to influence the process. Don't you think that this will be something that will be determined more by the APC internally? And beyond that, you are from the South-South. You said you prefer somebody from the South-South, and that it must be a ranking senator, a returning senator. Do you have any particular senator in mind whose candidacy maybe your caucus would like to support?
Okay, I would not like to be quoted out of contest. I said I am from the South-South, and as a senator from the South-South, we are going to meet as a region and take a decision on that. I didn't say I would prefer a Senate president from the South-South, and that would be very clannish at this point in time. I didn't say so. I said we will meet and take a decision as a region. And that's the position. And when it comes to the issue of the majority and the minority in the Senate, it is said that the majority will have their way, but the minority will have their say. But I don't think the majority of the APC senators will go for just a candidate. People have their own opinions, their assessment of the various senators and who are interested in all of this. And we are not trying to cause any upstage. We definitely know an APC senator will emerge as Senate president, but we will choose who we decide to support amongst all of them who have come up. That's the position. And the person we choose to support is going to win as Senate president, because the numbers between the minority caucus and the majority caucus is not that. Imagine it's not much, and I think we will decide who becomes Senate president amongst the lot.
All right. So I hear you, Senator Jarigbe, that despite the fact that you don't have majority seats in the House, because of the numbers, it would still be possibly a swing or perhaps significant impact on who emerges as Senate president. But I'd like to ask you, and delve a bit deeper, because it seems like you don't, I understand you don't want to commit yourself in terms of whom you think you'd be backing or your caucus would be backing. But I'd like you to assess those who have come out or who have indicated interest in this. I'll start with, from the South. Senator Godswill Akpabio has indicated interest. We have from the Southeast, Senator Orji Uzor Kalu, who's indicated interest. We have from the North Central, we have the current Senate President, Senator Ahmed Lawan. We have Senator Yari. We have a number of them. In your assessment, how would you assess their chances at Senate presidency?
Well, as I said before, most of them are ranking senators, apart from one or two. Some of them have been in the House of Reps. And all of us as senators can assess them in terms of competence and productivity, leadership qualities, and all of that. I will not want to start analyzing each of them. They have made their own marks in their perspective of governance and as legislators. But it's beyond all of that. It's about the politics. And as someone from the South, we'll be interested in who will further our interest as a people. So beyond all of these indices, competence, leadership qualities, and all of that, acceptability, we'll look at our own interest as a people, because politics is about interest. I think that is what will determine who we will support, because it's all politics. There is no shying away from that.
Earlier on, I mentioned the APC, that it looks like it is the APC as a party that will determine at the end of the day. And perhaps members of the APC would say they were aligned with the party. APC has about 50 seats, right, in the Senate. PDP 28. But you are saying you don't imagine that, the margin is that wide, and that maybe the APC would not be able to determine. Considering the fact that to choose principal officers, particularly Senate President and Deputy Senate President, what is required is a simple majority. So do you see the APC disagreeing, having disagreements among its members, which will now give advantage to the other political parties, especially the PDP, to get into the fray?
Anyway, the Senate is not about APC and PDP. There are other minority parties that are working together. The PDP, the Labour Party, the SDP, the NMPP, and all of that. And we have a caucus, a minority caucus. And now we've not been inaugurated, so we don't have a caucus, but we are meeting. And we have our groups. And we'll take decisions together as regions. Then we come as a minority, come together as a minority caucus to take a decision. So when you look at the numbers between the APC and the minority caucus, you discover that it's very slim. And I don't see the APC picking one candidate and going with that person to the end. Because there are various interests, as you have said, Northeast, North Central, South, and Southeast. So
all right.
We will make sure that we take a decision collectively and set the pace for all of them.
Okay, so you've described this as a game of politics. Interests matter and interests must align. May I ask you what your interest, perhaps your caucus's interest, would be in terms of in what way would you want the next Senate president to align with the interests of the minority groups?
Well, in terms of committees, in terms of lawmaking and all of that, the Senate president can shut down a lot of things that they think is not to the interest of their party. We want a Senate president that will be magnanimous, that will not be biased, will be a Senate president for Nigerians and not for his party, so that we can make laws for good governance and for the development of the country, for the general good of this country. That's what we are looking at.
Well, let me rephrase that. I mean, you've been in the Senate now, representing Cross River North for about 2 years. Right. But one major criticism of the Ninth Assembly is that it was largely, a rubber stamp assembly, with the Speaker of the House of Reps and the President of the Senate having started their career by saying that anything that the executive arm of government wanted, that's precisely what they would do, even if in the process this Ninth Assembly came up with a number of good legislation. What kind of National Assembly would you like to see under the 10th National Assembly? A rubber stamp assembly or, a different kind of assembly? Because it's not enough to say, oh, that will make laws for the good governance. That's the job of the legislature. But what kind of quality leadership would you like to see?
Anyway, we should be looking at a leadership that would improve on what we've done as the Ninth Assembly. But saying that this National Assembly has been a rubber stamp is not exactly correct, because I'll give you an instance. The bill on Ways and Means has not been passed. The executive sent it to us even before we went on vacation, and we debated on it. And we asked for further clarifications. And as I speak to you, we have not passed that. Ways and Means is still lying down there, not handled yet, because the National Assembly members declined. So we've not exactly been a rubber stamp, as people are saying. But in the Ninth Assembly, we want to improve. And that's why we want a Senate president that will be a Senate president for Nigerians and not for his party. For instance, I look forward to correcting the gray areas as it concerns the Electoral Act. If we do not have electronic voting and electronic transmission of results, then we are not ready for democracy in this country. And I think that the 10th Senate should look at that as a priority.
All right, excellent. I'm glad you talk about the Electoral Act of 2022 and the elections, as I was going to just, since you're here, ask you about the elections that saw you emerge as, or re-elected as a senator representing Cross River North. And this was keenly contested with the governor, the current governor of Cross River, Senator Ben Ayade. However, this wasn't without some accusations and counter-accusations, one of which is that you had said that the governor had sent thugs to disrupt the elections and that your character was maligned. There had been talks around there being perhaps you having the grounds to sue for defamation of character and the likes. I'd like to get your thought, your assessment of you on the elections, particularly in your jurisdiction.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the elections went on free and fair, all of that. But I think that that election was one of the most peaceful in all the states or in all the senatorial districts. And that's because, I'll say it again and again, my governor did not unleash mayhem in that very elections that concerned the National Assembly elections and the presidential elections. You know the powers of the governors. They can do and undo. But in this case, the Holy Spirit touched him, and he allowed a free and fair process, and I emerged. Yes, some other governors will say, how could you have allowed someone defeat you in your senatorial district as a sitting governor? Because They compromise the electoral process. In most of the senatorial districts where governors were running, and even where they were not running. But Governor Ben Ayade did not do that, and they see him as someone who did not do the right thing, when it's supposed to be the other way around. Some busybodies went around talking about the elections and accusing me. It was not actually Professor Ben Ayade or the governor of Cross River State that did that, but some busybodies. And you know, when you have hangers on, they take certain things into their hands, they take laws into their hands, and they go around doing a lot. And I assure you, even the tribunal case, I don't think he's the one that briefed the lawyers, because if you look at the case, you will discover that there's no reasonable cause of action. And I know Governor Ben Ayade will not have come up with that kind of suit, all of that. But I have forgiven all of that. I'm not suing anybody for defamation of character. I know that they were pained, and they reacted in an untoward manner. But that is gone. Well, elections have been won and lost. And
well, yeah. Senator Jarigbe, I mean, you got to the National Assembly through a by-election. The matter went all the way to the Court of Appeal. You were declared, you know, the validly elected person. Now, this time around, in 2023, in the general election, you were able to beat an incumbent. That's Senator Ben Ayade. But imagine, it's very narrow, just about 19,000 votes. And you have just talked about the tribunal. Are you preparing now for another round of litigation? And how confident are you this time around, if this matter goes, you know, to court, to the tribunal, that your victory over the incumbent governor will be retained?
Well, the matter is already in the tribunal, and I've briefed my lawyers. They have sent in my reply to the petition. But as I said, looking at the petition, there is no cause of action against the senatorial elections. The cause of action is against the presidential elections, because their pleadings, their evidence doesn't even support their pleadings, because it has to do, all their pleadings deal with the presidential elections. So I think the judiciary will do the right thing. I trust the judiciary.
All right, Senator Jarigbe, let me take you back to what you said with regards to the Electoral Act of 2022 when you were reviewing the activities of the 9th Senate. And you said that one of the things that you'd be looking to do, and with other senators in the 10th Assembly, is to review especially the part around the electronic transmission of results. INEC, in its response to petitions submitted by your presidential candidate of the PDP, Waziri Atiku Abubakar, and of the Labour Party, had defended their stance, saying that they had the right to determine what, you know, which means they would use to transmit results. They had promised, but that was just to assure Nigerians of credibility. In terms of reviewing the Electoral Act of 2022, what areas would you be looking to review? What areas do you think perhaps justice wasn't done in terms of highlighting, stating out? What provisions do you think should be emphasized in the Act?
I think that what the right words should be used. In this circumstance, INEC has been given a leeway to pick and choose. But the word shall should be included in the clause that says there should be electronic transmission. The Beavers report should be transmitted. The results should be transmitted. And I've gone further to say that there should be electronic voting. Nigeria is capable of funding that. There should be electronic voting and electronic transmission of results. And it should be mandatory, not optional. That should be our position. So I think that we should further amend the Electoral Act if we want democracy to thrive in this country.
Well, fine. Of course, we've been amending the Electoral Act since the return to civilian democratic rule in 1999. So that would be a good idea in terms of lessons we learned. So I take it that part of your legislative agenda would be to push for this further reform of the electoral framework. But what other plans as a senator representing Cross River North do you have in your plans for the people of that area?
Basically, we are looking at human capital development and infrastructural development. In all my years in the National Assembly, I make sure that I influence the inclusion of projects in the various communities, local governments, wards, in the national budget. And there is no ward in my senatorial district that I have not facilitated one or two projects, infrastructural projects, social amenities and all of that. And in the areas of employment, we're doing our best, though the government has made it very, very difficult for us to get employment for our teeming youths, graduates, and all of those people we have looking up to us. But we'll continue to do our best and come up with legislations that will add value to our people.
All right. Could you be a bit more specific? I know in terms of you'd wanted to establish a university in Ogoja and a few other things. What's the update on that, and what are some of your priorities in the 10th Senate?
Anyway, the issue of the Federal University of Technology Ogoja went through all the legislative processes and got to Mr. President for assent. And that was the last I heard of it. Coming from the opposition, there was very little I could do. And the issue of the Federal Medical Center was sent to Mr. President, went through third reading, passed all the legislative processes, and it was sent back. There was a recommittal of that bill, and it has been sent back to Mr. President for assent. There's no federal health institution or tertiary health institution in the whole of Ogoja, and the nearest tertiary health institution is about 400 kilometers away, and it doesn't help. That doesn't help our people, and I pray and hope that Mr. President will assent to that bill so that there will be an establishment of a Federal Medical Center in Cross River North.
Okay, let me ask you. I just need a clarification. On one hand, you said the election was free and fair, but you now also say that electronic transmission should be made compulsory going forward. Well, your concern about electronic transmission, is that a comment on the quality of the elections conducted by INEC? Because many people say the failure of technology marred that election, and that to that extent, the election was not free and fair. But you say it was free and fair, but now you are also saying electronic transmission is important. You have doubts?
That's why I said, in my own senatorial district, the election was free and fair. But it could be better if there was electronic transmission, real time. I don't think anybody would think of going to the tribunal because it's a function of Rep Sisa Locator. But in this case, there are gray areas, as we know. And it gives rise to all of these, compromise here and there. In my own senatorial district, there was no compromise. In some senatorial districts, in some local governments, there were no compromises. But generally, I think that because there was no electronic voting and electronic transmission, the elections were marred
Well,
with
voting. I imagine that it's natural.
Bloated figures and all of that.
I imagine that it's natural to.
Hello?
I imagine that it's natural for you to single out your own senatorial district. After all, you won. Maybe if you had lost, you would have a different opinion.
Well, I think even my opponent has alluded to the fact that the election was free and fair in his very private moment.
Okay, so just to clarify, he's saying that Professor Ben Ayade has called you to congratulate you on your winning and defeating him in the elections, but also to talk about that election in your senatorial district being free and fair. What's the story around the reports of the electoral officer in Ogoja being held hostage because there was they weren't able to declare or give you your certificate or issue you the result on the spot? What happened there? He said some of your supporters held him hostage. So if it was free and fair, was it free and fair on the side of the opposition, but your supporters were a bit hostile to the INEC official present in your district?
Okay, thank you. What happened was that on the Form EC8D, they had read out the results after completion, and the Act says that the winner should be declared with the Form EC8E1 for senatorial elections and EC8E for presidential. The Form EC8E1 was not available. When my agent tried to find out from the electoral officer and the returning officer for the senatorial district, they were told that the form was not available. Another electoral officer said it was misplaced, and they were looking for the form. And we had to get in touch with the resident electoral commissioner, who put a call through to the INEC chairman. And the INEC chairman asked that a Form EC8E1 be sent all the way from Abuja to Cross River State for that declaration to be made. But before that was done, the Form EC8E1 for Cross River North Senatorial District was found in Agom, and the EO of Agom called the EO of Ogoja and sent the Form EC8E down, and I was so declared using the Form EC8E1. Nobody was held hostage.
Okay, we'd like to thank you very much, Senator Jarigbe, Agom-Jarigbe, for joining us on The Morning Show.